time for that, I guess.
Yeah.
We shouldn't be concerned. Before we get started, I am sorry to tell you that we've had 2 members have to leave us. Jerry Reeves is being transferred, and she's resigning effective this month, and Jim Peoples has resigned effective the 31st.
Oh, really?
Who was the second one?
Jim Peoples. He didn't give any particular reason, but you know, Jim, he was one of the founding members, I think.
Yeah.
And he's with us for a long, long time. So we're going to miss him, and certainly going to miss Jerry. That's
Yes.
that's a shame. But
Wow.
you know,
Where was she transferred to or going to?
I heard that Southern Pines.
Southern Pines.
Well, anyway, it's about time. So let's go ahead and have the call to order and get the meeting started. Our invocation this morning will be from Bruce Meisner. Bruce, are you with us?
Yes, thank you, Dave. Let us pray, please. Our Heavenly Father, please watch over us during this pandemic crisis. Keep us always vigilant to the safety measures of masks and social distancing. During the Advent season, as we await the celebration of the birth of Christ, keep us mindful of the Rotary motto, service above self. In thy name we pray, amen.
Thank you, Bruce. And David, if you can you bring up the flag, please, sir?
Sure. 1 second.
Bruce.
Butch.
There we are. Thank you. And if you will, join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Pledge
allegiance
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
To the republic
the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
Liberty,
and justice for all.
justice for all.
Thank you. Of course, we are still looking for any contributions to Toys for Tots. And of course, it's been requested that the check go directly to the police department. And also we're looking for Polio Plus contributions. We'll be through with all that soon, but anything anyone can give would be certainly appreciated. At the same time, want to announce that starting in January, we will be hosting a joint meeting with the Thursday Club on the second Tuesday of the month. And then the Thursday Club will host us on the third Thursday of the month. We are going to try that for the month of January and see how it goes and see if the members like it and want to continue it. And if so, we will go on from there. But I did want to let you know that that is what is in the works for this coming January. And before we get into the program, are there any other announcements that a member would need to make this time?
Lou, is that a virtual meeting or is that at the club?
No, it will be virtual. David, we had talked and tried to work with the club about having an actual meeting. Our concerns were, of course, many, but one of the concerns was, would we be able to get enough people to satisfy the club's requirement of 35 people? And at the same time, in just chatting with different members, there is certainly some hesitation among some people about meeting in person this soon before we all get a vaccination. And I have my own personal concerns about that, being considered to be a member of the high risk group. We were going to try to have an actual attendance and then include a Zoom presentation for those who didn't want to show up. But as it turned out, the general consensus seemed to be that we should not be trying in-person meetings at this point. So these will be strictly virtual and via Zoom. We've had, of course, some joint meetings in Zoom already, and it seemed to work well. So I think it might be a good thing, and we can certainly have some good programs that way, and that's part of the objective. as all of you know, it's a little bit of a hassle from time to time to make sure we have the quality of programs that we'd like to have. Certainly, if we can do joint meetings, that should make it a little bit easier to get some really good programs, and that's what we're planning on.
Lou?
Yes.
I'll say that I have that program for January 12th, and it's going to be Dr. John Earl, who headed up the Pfizer research program here for the vaccine, and he's going to be talking about that. So I think that'll be timely and interesting to a lot of folks.
Well, I agree, and I appreciate your comment on that, and I'm really delighted that he is going to be one of our very first of the joint meeting, because that's the kind of program we want to get to as many people as we possibly can. And I think that will be a good start for that particular kind of meeting. And thank you for saying that. And now to our program, we're going to have what are called member stories. And our first one is going to be from Jim Whitworth. Jim, are you with us?
I'm here.
Good. You have the floor.
Well, when Ingrid called me the other day to ask me if I would do this, I was kind of shocked. And I was kind of honored when I saw who else was going to be there. But then she added, I know your profession's fairly boring and I don't know how you can make it interesting, but we need another volunteer. So I said, well, I'll do it. And I'll be honest with you. When I was growing up, I didn't even know what a certified public accountant was. All I ever did in my early years was play and watch baseball. And that's what I wanted to do for a living, believe it or not. But around age 13, the pitcher started throwing curveballs, and they're pretty difficult to hit. And secondly, I didn't have a whole lot of foot speed. I really thought I was fast, but one day my dad timed me from home to first base with a sundial, and I figured, well, I might as well give up on baseball. My mother was a registered nurse who had the distinction of being the first operating room supervisor at what is now Catawba Valley Medical Center, and she felt that the only worthwhile professions for either of her children were medical doctor and minister. And since my brother spent his time reading encyclopedias in the summertime, and in the 9th grade, I scored a 0 on the science portion of the aptitude tests that were given, my mother decided I would be the preacher. I didn't much like that idea. I prayed about it actually and asked God if I would ever preach the gospel to the masses. And my prayer was actually answered in a loud voice. I heard, "Not while I am God." So, therefore, I spent my high school years doing somewhat well in math and history and just getting by in science and English, thanks to good lab partners. But I had no idea what I was going to do. I never told my mother that I wasn't a minister. I didn't want to get in trouble. I attended summer school for 2 years in high school prior to my junior year, because prior to my junior year, I was not 16. I'd started school early. And my dad didn't believe that a teenager should be laying around the house, not working in the summer and sleeping all day. Accordingly, by the time I got to my senior year of high school, I lacked only one required course to graduate, and this was somewhat of a conundrum because back then there were only 6 periods in school, and I knew I had to take the required course, I think, which was English. I decided, well, I'd take Algebra 3, typing, and 2 study halls, but unfortunately that only counts to 5 courses. So the only courses that were remaining that I could actually choose from were economics, sociology, shorthand, and bookkeeping. And one day that summer, while I was working as a cashier / bag boy / stock person over here at the Winn-Dixie in Beaumont, I was speaking to a coworker about my conundrum, and he said, well, as I understand it, bookkeeping is an extremely easy course. I think the term he actually used was CRIP course. And since I was really into easy for my senior year, I jumped all over bookkeeping. And I actually thought it had something to do with working in a library. I figured I can sit in a library all day. Well, I was quite surprised to find that number one, it wasn't working in a library. And secondly, it was a quite challenging course. But I did find it interesting, and I kind of felt like, well, maybe this is something I'd really like to do. I was pushed by my accounting teacher, or bookkeeping accounting teacher over there named Elizabeth Shambly, she actually made me her assistant, and I was grading her papers. She gave me tax returns to prepare. So that made me feel important. And later at Lone Ryan with Professor Strunk and Professor McCreary, I really felt like this is what I wanted to do. I passed the CPA exam in '75. It took me a couple years to pass it because once again, I felt like, well, you really don't need to study for these things. And then I found out that only 17% of the parts were passed. So then I said, well, maybe I should study for this thing. And I did pass it. I worked at Thomas B. Bumbar and Company for 7 years. I've been with this company, Whiston Company, since then. I basically do tax work now. I do a few financial statements, but I've kind of graduated from audit work. And so therefore, because of this tax issue, I'll be working into my 51st tax season beginning in January. And if Ingrid will wake everybody up, that's the end of my career story.
Thank you, Jim. That was very good. We appreciate that. And I'm sure everyone stayed awake for the whole thing, contrary to your thinking on that. Our next one is Paul Caporossi. Paul?
And I'm here. Yes, I was pleasantly surprised when Ingrid called me, and she wanted to know how I got here. And I thought I was going to have to launch into a talk on the birds and the bees, but I realized that we really did have a more significant program at hand. So I'll give you my summary. It may not be quite as humorous as Jim's. I'm sure it's not, but in any event, here goes. I was born in New Jersey in 1939, and you can do the math from that, but I grew up in a small town in northern Jersey called Haledon, which was about an hour west of Manhattan. It was a blue-collar town, and we didn't even have a high school in those days, but I went to Patterson Central High School and eventually decided I would go to Cornell University and was accepted graciously. So in 1957, I went to Cornell, and while there, I actually wound up forming the Cornell Jazz Quartet, which allowed me to have some pocket money, playing mostly fraternity house gigs and so forth. And since I was interested in medicine in 1960, between my junior and senior year, I worked at Mountainside Hospital in Montclair, New Jersey, as an orderly. I think they call them attendants now, but I was an orderly, and I met a young lady, Lila, and we fell in love, and we married in 1962. That was after my first year in medical school, so she had to endure most of my medical education and postgraduate training with me. She worked as an OR nurse in the local Jersey City Hospital until she birthed our first son, Stephen, in 1963. I wanted to let people know about the impact of the draft on physicians, as the dates will clearly indicate. In the 60s, Vietnam was certainly gearing up, and we were all subject to the draft at that time. And quite frankly, one could have been drafted out of medical school, but more characteristically, that you would be drafted out of your internship or possibly residency. There was an alternative program called the Berry Plan, which allowed you to defer that draft until you completed all your postgraduate training, and then you would be obligated for 3 or 4 years of active duty service. There was a third option, which I wound up taking, and it was called the Army Senior Medical Program. We were living on Lila's $72 a week salary in a attic apartment, and so when they offered a commission as a second lieutenant and paying about $375 a month, I jumped at that, as did a few of my colleagues. And so I was actually a commissioned officer my senior year in medical school. It did obligate me for year for any postgraduate training, but be that as it may, it turned out to work out just fine. After graduation, Lyle and I drove across the country because my first assignment, namely my internship year, was in Honolulu, Hawaii. Now, don't, think too seriously about how choice an assignment that was, because we were really very busy. Long story short, we drove across the country with an 8-month-old second son, Jeff, who Lila delivered shortly before graduation from medical school. But in any event, for those of you who've been to Oahu, you may have seen the big pink palace sitting up on the side of the mountain overlooking Hickam Air Force Base and Pearl Harbor. But that's where I did my rotating internship. It's a less common program now in that most folks decide to go directly right into their residency, but this is the way the Army could assure a significant commitment on my part. So we had a very busy year. We were getting about 80 aerovacs a day from Vietnam, and I saw more tropical medicine than I thought I would ever see, since we had that microbiology in our second year of medical school, but God only knows, I didn't expect to ever use that again, but we saw it all. And I am really emotionally stressed by all the trauma and illness that I saw that year in Hawaii. I always wanted to be an OBGYN, so I wound up getting a residency, but again, the Army loved to try to get an extra pound of flesh out of you, so they insisted that all the surgical subspecialties get a year of surgery before they started their formal residency program. So we moved to Fort Ord, California, on the Monterey in California, and it was a busy year as well, for the same reasons. Vietnam was all cranked up, and we had a great experience there. But on the other hand, I was ready to do OB, so we moved to Tacoma, Washington, where Madigan General Hospital was, and we had a very, very busy program there. Lots of young faculty members that were also inducted into the Army to satisfy their military commitments. So these were young bucks who I thought taught me a lot of good stuff in the process. We had a very busy OB service, and I used to joke that basically I had a lot of men working for me, but you can figure that one out. After the residency program in 1970, I was transferred to Frankfurt, Germany. And I was there for a few weeks before Lila and the boys joined me. We had 3 boys at that time. And my first 24-hour duty included the dubious distinction of me delivering 20 babies in that 24-hour shift. Obviously, they were all fortunately uncomplicated, so everything went well. But it was a shock to go into the frying pan at that point. In any event, I didn't enjoy Frankfurt all that much, although we did get to travel some, but I requested and was granted a transfer to Nuremberg in southern Germany, and I became chief of OB there. And my 2 years there were very fulfilling, and it allowed Lila and me, and in some cases the kids, to travel pretty much throughout Western Europe, and gave me a good case of the wanderlust, which I shared with Lila, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But among the places that we were able to go is that since I was the chief of OB, I was the consultant to the embassy in Prague, what was then Czechoslovakia. And of course, it was behind the Iron Curtain. So Lila and I got to go and stay at the embassy's quarters there, and we ran a clinic, and we were able to see that there were lots of militia on every street corner in Prague, since it was a communist controlled country. And we were also told by our guides that in the entire country of what was then Yugoslavia, there were only 3 dialysis units. In order to be hooked up to one of those dialysis units, you need to be young, a young adult, and a member of the Communist Party. All others need not apply. So basically, that's the austerity that we saw on that trip. We also were able to travel to West Berlin at night because the communists would not let us travel during the day to see the desolation throughout Eastern Europe. But we were able to get across Checkpoint Charlie and get to East Berlin and recognize that East Berlin was very austere, probably much like the description that Jeff Klein had when he went to North Korea just a few years ago. In any event, we then rotated back to the United States. But before I left Germany, we were able to have what I consider the highlight of my career, in that I was able to fly to West Berlin to adopt our daughter, Lisa, and flew her back a la Stork, and to adoring family and friends hanging out of windows at our Nuremberg apartment. And indeed, she continues to be just a wonderful person, and we're so delighted to have been able to do that. When we let me just try to follow this a little bit. When we got back, I thought, well, we could look all over the United States because I trained on the West Coast and I loved West Coast medicine. But we had been away for 9 years and hadn't seen our family. So I looked in the Southeast and wound up looking in Hickory, since I had met one of my soon-to-be colleagues, Manny de los Santos, while I was in Frankfurt. So we settled in Catawba County, and we've just been blown away by all the things that Catawba County had to offer, be it the schools, the extensive social service programs, the arts. We had good colleagues, the list goes on, and I'm taking too much time, so I won't tell it all. But one of the things that occurred is that Catawba Women's Center and our group were responsible for all the health department and indigent care in terms of obstetrical deliveries. So we developed a residency program with Wake Forest, and we had a full-time resident, and eventually they started doing the delivery. That continued for several years. My medical administrative opportunities included being the chief of the medical staff at Catawba Memorial Hospital, now Catawba Valley Medical Center. On the board institution for 7 years, and was a clinical associate professor of OBGYN throughout most of my career. In terms of community involvement, I was on the board at Hickory Community Theater, elder of the First Presbyterian Church for 6 years. We did mission trips to the Yucatan Peninsula. Also volunteered to work on houses for Habitat for Humanity. And of course, I'm in a very enjoyable Rotary Club. What I've done since retirement in 2003 has to be defined prior to COVID, because since COVID, we've done nothing, which is unfortunate, but we have traveled extensively, mostly internationally, and especially on riverboats. I belong to a Thursday golf group, the Geezer Group, and every Thursday we play one of the local golf courses within an hour radius of Hickory. I have 6 grandkids. Lila and I have 6 grandkids, which we thoroughly enjoy. And I'm also a tinkerer, so I can fix things and do so. Our hectic life did not preclude our kids from going into medicines. So we actually wound up with 2 docs. One is an ER doc at MUSC, where he's on the faculty. And Lisa, of course, has been a family physician and also a medical director for geriatric medicine. And she's also doing recently some work on kids with learning differences, ADHD, and that whole spectrum on the autism spectrum. Our first son is working at MUSC in IT, and we have our 3rd son who's a real estate broker up in Portland, Maine. In truth, I couldn't have done any of this without the support from Lila, family, friends, and the great folks that supported us at both hospitals. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Very good.
Okay, Paul, thank you for that. That was very enlightening. Well, Ingrid, if you're with us, we have a total of 4 stories for today, and I've introduced the first 2. And would you please be so kind as to introduce the second 2?
Sure. I'm excited to have Mandy Hildebrand share her story, because many of us know her and know her parents, but it'll be interesting to hear how she ended up and deciding what she does for her career. So Mandy.
Thank you, Ingrid. So here, I put a little sticky note. So, I like just need some little sheets here, but just thank you so much for asking me. And I'll try to be brief, but when I was trying to think about, do I go backwards in the story or do I go forward? So I thought I would just go forward. The thing that stuck out when I was putting together some notes about how I got to be where I am today, it's all about opportunities. It's all about service. It's all about looking to see which doors are open. So I was born and raised in Hickory, obviously. And just, I know many of you, my parents are here, my brothers are here, their children are here. My husband's family is Hildebrand from there. So this is just our home, and there's no place I love more than this place, as you all know. So growing up here, graduated from Hickory High and then went on to Peace College in East Carolina. So I'm going to throw in a funny story that many of you that know my dad, Bill Pitts, would you can hear him saying this. So at East Carolina, I got really interested in anthropology and sociology, great fields. But I remember my dad calling me one day on the phone. He goes, I just think that's, great that you're really into sociology and the study of people, but, you're going to have to get another major so you can get a job, so you're going to have to find something else. Nothing against sociologists or anything like that. But he was like, what are you going to do? You're going to go back to school? I was like, no, I'm not going back to school. So anyways, I ended up with a journalism degree. So my first job out of college would have been Hickory Daily Record, wrote under Marjorie Pitts. That's my full name. Enjoyed that thoroughly. And I mean, Bruce is on here, Meisner and some others. I remember writing stories at a young kid of like 23 years old, 22, saying, okay, I'm writing a story about my city. So that's the first door that opened. So spent many years at the Hickory Daily Record, Gaston Gazette. moved to California. When I went to California, I thought, God, this is fun. In my mid-20s, I was home within a year because I really am a Carolina girl, and I didn't want to work four jobs to pay for rent. So came back. I won't go through all the jobs, but I ended up in 1998 as the public information officer for the city of Hickory. I was so proud of that job. I love that job. To this day, I still appreciate the opportunity that Mayor Bill McDonald and Gary McGee, that many of you all know, gave me that opportunity. And that was a door that opened for me because I had the Hickory Daily Record. I proved myself, just a girl that has connections. I really had a passion for the city and spent, I was really the second public information officer. The first one was there for about half a year. And then I came in and served in a role like that for 18 years. So I'm starting to tell my age. As many of you know, I turned 50 this year. So it's been a very, it's been a fun career path so far. So at the city of Hickory, I had so many mentors, many on this call that just wanted to grow. So my job was to inform citizens, everything from trash pickup to what our next building, what was our next building project, road projects. And it was really fun working with fire, police. It's just a wonderful job and I still miss it today. It's great. And that turned into the communications, which I've given many. I moved into communications director. So I started with a one person shop. And then by the time I left the city of Hickory in 2005 to pursue the career I'm in now, we had a department of about 5, because if you think about how much public information is turned into communications and marketing, and we created the Lifeful Crafted brand in 2011. I can't believe that's going to be 10 years old this year, but that was a big project. Worked with citizen groups. There's just so much about having the opportunity to work with the city. I hope I'm not rambling on. I really could talk for an hour, but one thing I wanted to highlight about the city is there was some leaders there that saw potential in me and encouraged me to go back to school to get my master's in public administration at Appalachian. Bruce was one of those, and just really encouraged me to pursue the career of being a city manager, assistant city manager, or something. They could see that. So I really will never take that for granted. And they said, one thing about education is, no one can ever take that away from you. And it's always something you'll learn from. So I got my degree from Appalachian. The first time I ever made the dean's list, probably because I was paying and such, but I really enjoyed that. And from there, it just helped me develop into a leader at the city of Hickory and really enjoyed that. And some of those leaderships were really through Hickory JCs, through being really active at my church, First Presbyterian, with Dr. Caporossi and many others on this call as well. So I just think the leadership opportunities there really helped me to grow, to lead an organization to a positive way for greater things. And it was just a fabulous opportunity. So what happened when I'll talk about doors opening, I remember I was on the visitor center board, which that was a board and I really enjoyed welcoming visitors. Like, you're marketing visitors to other people and you want them to come here to have meetings, to explore, because it's a really, we have so many great assets. So when this opportunity arose about 5 years ago, and I think I may have told many of you these stories too, but I know we have some new people. The opportunity to be the head of this tourism, I just knew it was the right thing to do for me. And I'm still working with the city of Hickory. It's just like they're my cousin now. They're not like, I'm not working directly for the city, but they are part of, obviously, the convention center and the visitor center. So I just believe, going backwards, all of those doors have opened and have led me to the most trying year of my career. I have 3 words on my bulletin board in front of me. One is spark, because it's a word I got from First Presbyterian in January, talking about the new year. The other one is calm, as we got to be calm this year. And the one I added this week is fear not, because that's the kind of year it's been. All of us are probably part of that, but this convention and tourism, it's been a challenging year. But I look back of all the challenges that, for the city of Hickory, other things along the way, and I believe it's built me to kind of move us forward to get to the 21st, to the 2021, 22. So I hope that's making sense. Somebody shake your head if you think it's making sense. But my whole point is I enjoy what I do now. And for those of you, just quick summary, my main job is heads and beds and bottoms and seats. Well, there haven't been many of those this year, but I have a great board and they're working, you know, as we're moving forward. And actually we've had the opportunity during this pandemic to help companies like Alex Lee, you know, have a place to train new employees and make sure food gets across our country. We've had we may have an opportunity for something else in the near future, which I don't really want to talk about now because it's on the low key, but it's a way how we can be a part in making sure that everybody gets vaccinated, who that wants to be vaccinated. So I feel like we're playing a major role in getting through this pandemic and when all that gets better, we'll go back to getting visitors to our area, getting meeting groups to our area as well. And I hope that summarized it all. Again, wasn't all over the place, but I am thankful. And I think that one of the threads through the whole story is service. My dad was a member of Lake Hickory Rotary, which is one of the reasons that when Bruce Meisner asked me to be a part of this club, that I said, yes, I'm ready, I'll do it. I think service humanity is the most important thing. And I feel like through my career, I've been able to do that.
Thank you, Mandy. Yeah. Service above self. So, and speaking of Rotary and the 4-way test, we actually have 4 people sharing their stories today, which is a great way. And as you can tell, we have lots of different careers in this club. So we've heard from Jim, a CPA, and trust me, I don't think it's boring, Jim, so don't let him fool you. Sir Paul, your story and where you've been all over the world, absolutely fascinating with your medical background. Mandy's communication skills, certainly knows how to tell a story. And then now we get to hear from David Hood, who, as most of you know, is in a law career. And so I'm very excited to hear from David now.
Well, I'm about to disappoint you and probably everyone else on this call. But let me say, first of all, I appreciate the opportunity to talk about my career path a little bit. When I was a young fella, I was a performer, as many of you know. I still do that some. So I was a song and dance and actor guy from the age of 3 on to. So if one had asked, me when I was 10 or something, what do you want to do? I would have said, I either want to do that or I want to be president, or there's the things that you get from a 10-year-old. But as I got older into high school, I began to realize that I probably should feed some interest that would actually allow me to feed myself later as a career, because performing is not one of those, surprisingly enough. So one of the things I got into in high school was the debate team, which really appealed to me because I was always interested in political issues, political history, political systems, and most of the debate topics had to do with political issues. And so as opposed to the crap we see today that's not actual debates that you see on television during that's not anywhere close to what an actual debate team does. Debate teams are really focused on learning the issues about that particular topic that year, and then crafting arguments for and against positions taken within that debate topic. And you have to learn how to make arguments for both sides of the same issue, which helps you understand nuance and helps you understand the ins and outs of issues and realize that things are way more complicated than anybody wants to give them credit for. And so that's one of the benefits of debate. And so when I went to Chapel Hill, I kept going on in debate and was on the debate team as an undergrad in Chapel Hill. My brother and I were actually a debate team, and intercollegiate debate team, traveled around the country debating. And you can understand what novelty that was to have identical twins as the debate team. And we were pretty competitive up to a point, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But one of the greatest things for me in that being on, and we were the top debate team for the last 2 years we did it at Chapel Hill. And so we got to travel to all the tournaments around the country. And that was the first time I really had a chance to visit around the country. That was not something we had money to do when I was growing up with 5 kids in the house and two people in educate, two parents who were both in education. We didn't have any money for that. But being able to go around the country and see, I remember going to a tournament in Dartmouth in January, and there was like 7 feet of snow. And I'd never seen that much snow in my life. It was amazing. Went to the restaurant and I ordered tea. And they brought me this steaming thing with a bag in it. I said, "What is? I don't even. What is this?" I wanted iced tea. They said, "That's not in season." And I'm like, I'm in a different world. But it was great to learn about those different worlds. But we got to the point in our junior year where we really could not win the big tournaments. And I kid you not, it's because we were from the South and we talked too slowly. In order to win intercollegiate debate in the 80s, there was some quantity aspect to it, the number of arguments you could make and counter arguments you could make and so forth. And frankly, we could not talk fast enough to win against the big, nor did we want to, because it sounded ridiculous. So we actually just sort of dropped out and said, we're going to do something else now. So we started a political magazine at Chapel Hill called the Carolina Critic. And the whole point of that was to have something that would talk about political issues from different perspectives. And even though we were both more to the right than the left, the Carolina Critic had a lot of different people in it. And the whole point was to have debates, believe it or not, about political issues. And that magazine actually led my brother off to the career he's still doing, which is political commentary. But it also led me, I think, directly into law school, because I began to realize that what I liked about it was the actual argumentation itself, not being argumentative. I'll come back to that in a minute, but the ins and outs of the interplay between the pros and the cons and who's right and who's wrong about this particular issue. That fascinated me. So I figured, you know what, I could do that as a litigation lawyer. So I went to law school with that in mind, and it turned out that that was something I had an aptitude for. And so when I came out of law school, that's what I wanted to do, was to be a litigation lawyer, which in the legal career, there's essentially 2 tracks. I mean, this is oversimplified, but you can either be a litigation person or you can be a transactional person. And transactional lawyers more deal with, things that are not directly leading to a fight or a debate between 2 or more positions. Litigation lawyers, that's what we do, is resolve those. But now I'm going to say, first of all, how I got to Hickory, which very quickly, the law firm here, Patrick Arbor Dixon, interviewed on campus. I sort of knew where Hickory was. My dad was from Lenore. I had some general concept, but it was really just coincidental that the firm was interviewing on campus, and my wife got a job in Hickory at the Charlotte Observer's Hickory branch. So she was at the Catawba Valley Neighbors for a number of years before she went to the seminary and went off in a different direction. But we came to Hickory because that was where we both got offered a job. So that was the coincidence. And I have not regretted it one bit. It has been spectacular for a lawyer learning how to do things, to go to a place like Hickory, which has honestly a very sophisticated, and you all know this, a very sophisticated business community in relation to the size of Hickory. And that combination of being able to live in a place like Hickory and work on more complicated civil litigation has been just an absolute spectacular bonus to me. But let me talk just a second about law, and then I'm going to close this up. A lot of people would say, "Oh, you're a lawyer," and then that automatically means 2 or 3 negative things. And I understand that. If you want to talk about people who have to deal with difficult, over-argumentative, and people and lawyers who are just mean, talk to other lawyers. We're the people that have to deal with them a lot more than anybody else, and there are some terrible ones out there, but there's not that many. Most litigation lawyers realize that they are not in the conflict creation business. They are in the conflict resolution business, which is exactly the way I've always thought about it. Client comes to me with a problem or a situation they're in, or a loss they have suffered, or a lawsuit that's been filed, or whatever. And my job is really to what lawyers in law school call issue spot. First of all, figure out what are the factual and legal issues in play here. Secondly, what is the strategy that I can craft to present my side of those factual and legal issues in a persuasive manner? And third, what's the best way to resolve that dispute? Sometimes that resolution involves going to court and winning or losing. And I've done that a lot of my career. But often the lawyers who are really trying to do the right thing are looking for opportunities to resolve those disputes like a settlement. And the way you do that is, back when I was in the debate world, you realize that there are often two sides to every single issue. And good lawyers will think about, what if I was in the other guy's or other gal's moccasins? What would that tell me about my position? What is the strongest argument against me? What is the biggest weakness my position and or my client has? And you evaluate those things and you try to figure out, in addition to all of those issues, what are the interests involved? Why does the other side think that this is the right answer? And why do they keep acting like this? Sometimes you can figure out what their motivation is or the incentive they're dealing with, and you can accommodate it in a settlement. And so good lawyers, litigation lawyers, try to do that. And I have had the benefit, really, of learning from a lot of really good lawyers. Hickory was so blessed when I came to town to have spectacular lawyers to learn from. Some were in my firm, but honestly, many of them were not in my firm. And I'm just going to embarrass Jeff Mackey right now and say he was one of the people that I learned from, because I thought that Jeff always handled himself in a professional and effective way for his clients. And so he was definitely one of the people that I considered a role model as I was learning how to do this stuff. But as I say, good lawyers, that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to resolve the conflict. And so I understand the criticism of the law, because as I say, I see those people a lot. But I will tell you, just from my vantage point, that most of the people in my business really are trying to do that. They're trying to resolve the conflict in a way that is the most beneficial to their side, for sure, but also the most economical and the least stress-inducing and strife-causing way. And so that's what my job is now. I'm basically a civil litigator that handles cases about businesses suing each other, having claims against each other, real estate disputes, estate disputes, construction disputes. And I do a lot of mediation, which is another thing I learned, frankly, by watching Jeff, was how to be somebody who comes in as a third party neutral and tries to get the parties to resolve their case in a particular way. So I enjoy that job very much, and I have been thankful for the opportunity to not only to do that kind of job, but to do it in a spectacular place like Hickory. And I'll just close by saying something we also already know, is that Hickory is a great place to have a family and raise kids. Even if they don't stay here, they've got a great grounding, and both of my kids got that in this community. We were in St. Stephen's district, so they went to St. Stephen's High School, but you know, the schools we've got around here are outstanding. And so that's my story ends with saying, I have come to a great community. I've tried to do my best to help improve that community, and I really appreciate still being in this community. And that's all I have to say about that.
Great job. That was great.
Good job.
Thank you.
Yeah, I hope everyone has enjoyed these member career share stories. I personally now have new things to talk about all of you with on another time whenever we see each other again, that I learned about today that I'm excited to ask you about later. So thank you all so much for sharing. And Lou, back to you.
Okay, Ingrid, and Ingrid, a special thank you to you for putting this together. That was really interesting. All four of those, I really thoroughly enjoyed that. And I appreciate your going to the time and trouble to put that together. There will be no meeting next week. It's Christmas week, so we will skip that particular meeting. We will reconvene on the 29th, and on the 29th, our invocation will be from John Nelson, and that particular meeting will be a club assembly. And that's the time when we will elect all of the officers of your Rotary Club that will take office on July the 1st of 2021. Before we sign off, though, with the four-way test, I'd like to take this opportunity to wish each and every one of you a happy and a Merry Christmas and a healthful and a safe Christmas. All of you have a great, great holiday. So if you will, join me in the four-way test. of the things
We think, say or do. Is it the truth? Bear it all. Build goodwill and better friendship. Be beneficial to all concerned.
Thank all of you for joining us today, and I'll look forward to seeing all of you in 2 weeks.
Merry Christmas.
Christmas, everybody.
Merry
Thank you. Great program. Thank you.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.